Hi, I'm Harold Bell, and this is the Legends of Inside Sports and the Way We Were. On today's show, I want to take time out to send my deepest sympathy and condolences to the family of Roland Fatty Taylor. Fatty was a native Washingtonian. He grew up in Northeast D.C. and was a product of the D.C. public schools. Fatty transferred from Spingarn High School and graduated from Fairmont Heights High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. He died in Denver, Colorado on Thursday, December the 7th, 2017. Fatty was 71 years old. When I first met Fatty on the Calomilla playground in the late 50s, he was just a little chubby guy hanging out with two skinny guys by the name of Dave Bing and Donald Hicks. They would usually arrive early and shoot around until the bigger and older guys got ready to play. I would walk from my Northeast Parkside housing project on the weekends to Calomilla. There was where the best competition could be found. Fatty and his crew would become regulars among the spectators and often witness playground basketball played at its highest level. You hear what I said? At its highest level. Calomilla was not a basketball court for the weak of heart or for crybabies. Even though our athletic foundations were laid on Northeast playgrounds and at Spingarn High School, Fatty and I both graduated from Fairmont Heights. After graduation in 1959, I headed south to Winston-Salem State University to chase my dreams of playing in the NFL. During the summer break, I would return home and find the chubby little guy and skinny little guys had grown up and were playing on the same courts with me, Calomilla and Brown. During the Christmas break, Spingarn would hold an annual varsity versus alumni basketball game, and it was there I would encounter Hicks and Bing, but no Fatty Taylor. I later learned he had followed my lead and enrolled at Fairmont Heights. He would later tell me I had recommended the school to him, but I didn't remember that conversation. I did remember telling him the basketball coach, Kenny Freeman, was a great coach who refused to let me play. My Spingarn football coach, Dave Brown, told Coach Freeman I was there to graduate and I was to play only one sport. I guess he took that conversation as a recommendation. Fatty, Bing, Donald, and I became good friends. I was more like a big brother. Sometimes I would arrive late and the games had already begun. There was always a backup for next, but if one or the other was on the winning team, they would let me take their place in the lineup and I would do the same for them. Fatty was a real aggressive player even back then. Donald held his own as a ball handler, but Dave Bing became a crybaby. He didn't like contact. When we were on the opposite teams, I played him one-on-one all over the court. I liked the challenge, and he didn't. I remember that summer at Calomilla like it was yesterday when he said enough was enough without opening his mouth. As usual, I decided I was going to guard him. On that particular day, I discovered he was much stronger than I remembered. He was only a junior at Syracuse, but he took me to school anyway. He no longer allowed me to push him around. He ran by me so fast and jumped so high, I thought he was on a pogo stick. The message was loud and clear. There was a new sheriff in town, and his name was Dave Bing. The next summer, I switched to tennis. In 1966, Dave was selected in the second round of the NBA draft by the Detroit Pistons. He averaged 20 points a game. He was named NBA Rookie of the Year. I remember sitting in Frank's restaurant on 8th and U Street Northwest having lunch on that summer day when Dave and my childhood friend Arnold George walked into the restaurant. We waved to each other and the two came over to the table. I got up to greet them. I shook hands with Arnold first and then Dave. We exchanged small talk, and I told Dave how proud I was of him and jokingly said, I taught you everything you know. His response surprised me when he said, Harold, you helped prepare me for the wars of the NBA. And we both broke out laughing. I made a lot of player haters madder when I used Dave's own words to describe our relationship over the airways and in print media. It was not my fault. I was the only one of his mentors that had a sports talk radio show and had a nonprofit organization that he supported. Unbelievable that that kind of envy and jealousy still exists in our community today. When Fatty graduated from Fairmont Heights, I remember him asking me about Winston-Salem State and big house games and what was it like to play for him. I told him, Big House will kick your ass if you step out of line. But he saved my life, Fatty, when he gave me a chance to get a college education. I called Coach Gaines and recommended Fatty sight unseen. Big House had former athletes like me all over the East Coast as recruiters. He took my word, and Fatty was all set to go to Winston-Salem. But he disappeared without a trace. I found out later through the grapevine, he had decided to attend Dodge City Community College in Kansas, and the rest is basketball history. Fatty and I had a lot in common. We were similar in size when it came to sports, and neither one of us liked to lose. I never saw a shot I could not make and a football I could not catch, and Fatty never saw a shooter he could not stop. Plus, he had street sense and common sense. He and Bing hung out with my younger brother Earl, known as the Bull. They became a group of petty thieves. They could be found hanging out on the busy weekends of the Northeast 8th Street corridor, robbing businesses who left their cash registers unguarded. Thanks to his coach William Roundtree, Bing avoided jail time for one of his petty crimes. I was a hard-nosed basketball defender at Spingarn under the tutelage of Coach Roundtree. He used my athleticism, competitiveness, and installed something called the boxing one defense. It was designed for me to guard the opposing team's top scorer while everyone else played zone. It was great until I discovered my name was never in the newspapers after holding the team's top score below his average. My senior year, I spent the summer on the playground developing a jump shot, and all hell broke loose the following school year. My new role as a scorer didn't sit well with my coach or my teammates. I was kicked off the team for selfish behavior. I immediately transferred to Eastern High School, where I was going to hell in a hurry. Coach Brown stepped in and recommended me to the coaching staff at Fairmont Heights, saving me from the mean streets of D.C. Years later, I discovered Fatty had tried out for the Spingarn basketball team, but for some reason he and Coach Roundtree didn't see eye to eye, and he followed my lead and transferred to Fairmont Heights. The rest is basketball history. Against all odds, despite all the naysayers and player haters, he went the distance, all the way from Dodge City Community College to LaSalle University to the Sunny Hill Basketball League and to the Philadelphia 76ers. All these institutions led him to a stellar 8-year pro career in the ABA NBA. Fatty joined the American Basketball Association in 1969. After 1 year playing for the Washington Capitals, he moved on to the Virginia Squires, with whom he spent the prime of his career, scoring 3,495 points, handing out 1,737 assists, and grabbing 1,715 rebounds in 5 seasons. He became known as one of the few outstanding defensive players in the league, known primarily as a run-and-gun operation. On the Squires, Fatty played with former NBA stars Adrian Smith, Jumbo Jim Eakins, Julius Dr. J. Irving, and for 1.5 seasons, he was a teammate of George Gervin. He has been credited with coining Gervin's nickname, the Iceman. He first called Gervin Iceberg Slim Remember that movie? But Iceberg Slim got lost somewhere in the shuffle and the Iceman stuck. George flew in from San Antonio, Texas, and was at Fatty's bedside the night before he passed away. I was not surprised because that is what friends are for, and George Gervin has always been a class act. Fatty retired in 1977 with a combined ABA NBA totals of 5,098 points, 2,563 assists, and 2,524 rebounds. He was named to the ABA's All-Defensive First Team in 1973 and 1974. Fatty never developed a decent jump shot, but the jump shooters respected and feared his in-your-jockey strap mentality defensive skills. He was known as a defensive standout. In a recent conversation I had with Philadelphia mentor, playground, and NBA legend Sonny Hill, he said, Fatty is on my all-time list as a great player, but he was a better human being. Philadelphia will be heartbroken when they hear the news of his death because this city loves him like he was one of their very own. He never forgot who he was and where he came from. He loved his hometown of Washington, D.C. and his homeboys. During his pro career, he often reached out to me and would call and say, Harold, who you got on Inside Sports tonight? You want Dr. J? We're going to be hanging out together at a concert. Give me a time to call and I will make it happen. He kept his word, as he did with the Iceman, George Gervin, David Thompson, and George McGinnis, all NBA Hall of Fame players, and all made guest appearances on Inside Sports, thanks to Roland Fatty Taylor. Fatty was like a little brother to me, and sometimes he would make a mistake like most human beings because we all are flawed. What I liked about him, he never made excuses and would always say, Harold, I have to do better. Sometimes he did and sometimes he didn't, but I still loved him. He sometimes traveled in the fast lane, but I always told him, if you got a problem, you can always call me and we can talk. He and Dave Bing were really close, and I knew he had mixed emotions because I had to remind Dave who he was and where he came from on several occasions. It was tough love with me in every sense of the word when it came to Dave. I treated Dave and Fatty and all these guys like my little brothers, just like I treated Earl. When he stepped out of line, I let him know that he was out of line. You know, Dave Bing was the first pro athlete to join my nonprofit organization, Kids in Trouble, in 1965. He led the way in reaching back into the community to enhance the growth and development of inner city children. He cared long before the NBA. Dave's problem, he was surrounded by too many homeboy cheerleaders. Fatty finally called me several years ago while he was home to check on family members. I picked him up and we rode around D.C. for about 30 minutes, and then we stopped at Denny's restaurant on Benning Road in our old neighborhood to get something to eat. Benning Road and East Capitol Street brought back memories of the hood, the neighborhood, especially when he saw the landmark shrimp boat still standing tall. He said, seeing the shrimp boat is like seeing the Washington Monument flying into National Airport. I know I'm home. We talked about life and how far we both had come against all odds. He then broke the news that I never expected to hear from a man. He said, I had breast cancer, man. I sat there in silence for what seemed like 2 or 3 minutes, and he finally said, I'm okay. I'm okay. He wanted to talk about his work with at-risk kids in the Colorado high school system. It was there he realized the need to form his own program, which resulted in the development of his nonprofit organization, Tailor Made Players. I jokingly said, sounds like Kids in Trouble to me, Fatty. He looked up and said, man, we have always followed your lead since we were little guys on the playground. He was especially proud of having to work with his son, Kobe. Fatty had failed As an entrepreneur with several businesses that included restaurants and nightclubs in Denver and one here in Washington, D.C., he had finally found his calling, Kids in Trouble. And then there was the work he was doing with the Susan G. Komen race for the cure for breast cancer. He started out there being an uphill battle because men are only 1% of the victims. After being cancer free for several years, since 2000, Fatty's fight began all over again in 2009. He said, I began having breathing problems following a busy summer traveling with my AAU basketball team. Doctors found blood clots in my lungs, and I was diagnosed with cancer in my left breast. Man, I was all shook up, Harold, and I could not believe this was happening to me all over again. It was a wake-up call as far as a person thinking that they are healthy, and then one day they tell you it's cancer again. Just as he had passed along his basketball knowledge to young players, he now wanted to help educate fellow breast cancer patients, particularly men who may have felt confused and isolated. He wanted them to know they were not alone. Fatty was thankful that the cancer in his left breast was not as severe as it was in his right breast in 2000. I left Denny's restaurant that day thinking, Fatty is going to beat this cancer. But this one-on-one, up-close and personal fight with his deadly disease, there would be no overtime. The Lord reached down on Thursday, December the 7th, 2017, and said, Come home, my son, and run the point guard and play defense for my team of all-star coaches. Red Auerbach, Big House Gaines, Johnny McClendon, Dave Brown, William Roundtree, and players Wilt Chamberlain, Connie Hawkins, Bad News Bonds, Earl Lord, and Sid Catlett. Here you will never have to worry about fouling out. As always, Fatty Taylor went down fighting. You know, as I leave out of here, and once again, I want to send my deepest sympathy and condolences out to Fatty's family and his many, many, many friends all over this country. People love Fatty. They love Fatty. You couldn't help loving Fatty if you know him. And I just want to say that, as I think back and how blessed we all have been to have Fatty to have touched our lives, truly a blessing. Now, for more update on funeral arrangements for Fatty, I understand there's going to be a funeral on Friday, December. I think it's the 15th or 17th. I don't know, but this coming Friday, there'll be a funeral in Denver, and then they're planning on bringing his body home for his final resting place here in Washington, D.C. So just stay on Facebook and look at my blogs, and you get all the information. And I just want you to remember that as we go out of here, that every black face you see is not your brother, and every white face is not your enemy. And my blog is theoriginalinsidesports.com, or you can find me on blackmeninamerica.com. But until next time, I'm Harold Bell, and you can color me gone.